At the outset, we want to thank all the sponsors and partners who are supported for this event and making this event very grand and successful. Today, we want to talk about the topic trends and best practices in return on investment of coaching. For all clients, either individual or organization, return on investment is one of the basic needs and expectations. And the client expects results and the impact, which can be short term or long term, and should be quantified, either qualitative or quantitative. In today's topic, trends and best practices in ROI of coaching, we are going to explore what are the best ways we can actually take this concept to the sponsors in the organization as well as the individual clients. Coaches are often challenged by prospective sponsors and clients to describe the substantial return on investment before embarking a coaching agreement. Mature leaders and organizations have greater clarity because coaching can make difference and provides greater returns in long term. And this session provides a new approaches for measuring return on investment. Today, we have a wonderful panel of speakers and moderator who are ICF coaches, HR leaders, and research scholars with the right composition of areas of expertise to provide larger insights during the session. Let me introduce the panel one by one. First, Kameshwari Rao, who is called as CAMS. As a Chief People Officer, she leads the People's Success function globally at Publicis Sapient and works to create strategic direction for the company's people agenda. Since 2001, she has been an integral part of Publicis Sapient's growth into a trusted digital business transformation partner for clients. She made a significant contribution in promoting diversity, equity, and inclusions. She is very passionate about corporate social responsibility, and she wants to create an environment where everyone can be happy and thriving. Next, I would like to introduce Gage Ammons. Gage is a research specialist at the International Coaching Federation and a faculty member in the Department of Psychological Science at Northern Kentucky University, where he teaches Introduction to Psychology courses. Gage graduated from Kentucky University with his Masters of Science in Industry Organization Psychology. He is passionate about helping others and researching in the following topic area: coaching, human performance, stress, and health and wellness. Now I would like to introduce our moderator of this panel, Ram Gopalan. Ram is a co-founder at Simply Coach, a coaching management platform of choice for ICF and EMCC credential coaches. He is recognized as one of the most talented coaching leaders in India by CHRO Asia. Ram is a PCC from ICF and is also certified in Marshall Goldsmith Stakeholder-Centered Coaching. Ram has served as VP and Country Manager for Sapient Nitro and brings decades of experience in coaching senior executives. His track record for building successful teams gives Ram credibility with his clients. Without wasting any time, I would like to hand over this session now to Ram, the moderator.
Thank you, Dr. Aravindan, and lovely to have you all. We've got around 80 participants in there, so it promises to be one crackling session. And as Dr. Aravindan mentioned, we've got a fantastic panel out here. We've got a representative from our client organization, which is CAMS here, and we've got somebody representing research from ICF here, Gage. So it's fantastic. So first things first, I want to start off with a poll out here just to get started. So that's the first poll out there, right? How many of your coaching clients are discussing ROI with you, right? None at all, just a few of them, most of them, all of them, right? All right, we're up to 32 votes out there. 35, so we are at the halfway mark there, almost. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes. . All right. Just one more minute. Gage, you're looking at that. Does that surprise you, Gage, that the kind of numbers there that you're seeing?
No, not really. It seems to be fairly evenly distributed with a skew towards the none at all side. It seems to be about what the research and my research has indicated.
Fantastic, thank you. So, as the poll continues, right, I'm going to keep that there for a minute, and I'm going to ask you this, right? We've been speaking about ROI for a very long time. So, if you were to just go and Google ROI on coaching, you find research articles coming in from late 90s, early 2000. So, what has changed in the last couple of years in terms of looking at ROI?
So, I found that recently, in the last, say, 5 years or so, nothing has really changed too much in terms of how you evaluate ROI. What I noticed that has changed is that coaching has grown tremendously, with ICF then having record levels of credential holders. The income across the entire industry is hitting record highs, and then the amount of people across the world and organizations that are aware of coaching and the benefits, right? So even though the way that we're evaluating ROI hasn't really changed, or the way to do such hasn't changed, there's still growth of coaching across the globe, and there are still many locations and organizations in the world that are still unaware of coaching and the potential. So I'd infer just by that, coaching has even more room to grow, and potentially the way we evaluate ROI might change or deviate based on how we do it now as we expand into different areas across the globes and organizations that are currently unaware.
Perfect. Thanks, Gage. Cams, Sapient has been running coaching programs from individual episodic level of coaching to I would say programs right now. What has changed for you when you look at ROI from coaching?
So like you rightly said, I think for us, the journey of coaching probably started 10 or 12 years ago, I would imagine, if I remember right. We started with something called Coaching for Performance, and it was very internal driven. And then there were like all these episodic coaching interventions that we did for senior leaders. We didn't actually go into it with any thought of ROI, if I remember, those days. It was more the belief that, coaching at an individual level can make a difference from an individual standpoint. But having said that, I think more in the last few years, just like, I think everything we have to define effectiveness, because, when you're trying to decide investment in one or the other, you want to think about what is more effective. So I don't know if we can call it ROI, but I think effectiveness is what we are certainly starting to measure more probably in the last couple of years. And I'd say that, gathering data is step one. Otherwise, how will you measure ROI? And the data is around individual performance or individual metrics. It's around team performance or team metrics, and then organizational performance or organizational metrics. So it's definitely a step in the direction. Maybe it'll get to ROI, but it's definitely how are we measuring the investment dollars? What are we getting the return on that? Or how are the metrics different for people who go through coaching and for people who don't, right? I think so that's what we're measuring now.
So I love the way that you're looking at it and saying people who are going through coaching and people who are not going through coaching camps. But what about when coaching is part of leadership development programs, where coaching is just one part of a talent development journey? How do you then talk about attribution to coaching?
I actually don't think you can, and that's my sense that I don't think we can, because for us, again, I'll give you our example, and you probably are aware of it as well. From our perspective, coaching forms, I would say, at least 50%, if not more, of the construct of any leadership development program. So if you think about it that way, any return that we evaluate at a leadership development program, can be, you can say it's 50% attributable to coaching, but we have not separated that out. But what I have seen, both when we do qualitative assessment of people, I think we have seen a higher return, if I say, at an individual level, from when I think about coaching, where people individual growth or individually they have benefited is far higher than I would say at an organizational level. So if I think about, if you go back to the parameters I talked about with this individual, team, and company, at an individual level, more than 75 to 80% have found it beneficial, coaching that is specifically. At a team level, it's hard because you are trying to figure out engagement metrics or retention metrics or things like that. It's hard to isolate the factors to coaching. But there's definitely a higher level of engagement in the team that we find. But at an organizational level, these individuals then again becomes a little more easier because they are far more involved in organizational level activities, not just their own team level activities. So I think attribution is hard, Ram. So I don't even know how one would do that. But because in our case, more than 50% is comprised of coaching and associated with coaching, I would say it has a big role to play in the outcomes from the program.
Fantastic. Thank you. Gage, have you had any chance within ICF to think about attribution when coaching is part of leadership development programs?
We have not conducted any research of the sort yet. So we just, a lot of the research we're doing now is based around team coaching, where we rolled out those competency models, or the competency model towards the end of last year. But in terms of ROI or coaching, we've written a few white papers internally to evaluate and provide as a resource for coaches. But that's been the extent of our ROI research in terms of anything with leadership development specifically.
Perfect. Gage, you naturally segued into team coaching, and that's big because ICF recently rolled out the competencies. Can you talk about what is the ICF guidance in terms of measuring coaching ROI when you're talking about teams or groups?
Yeah, so team coaching and team coaches specifically then have it more complex when they're dealing with teams as compared to with individuals, right? So they need to understand how to identify and resolve conflict internally and possibly externally, the power dynamics of the team, understanding what's required for the high-performing teams, how to build the cohesion around the team, the rules and norms, the participation and contribution by all team members, and promoting ultimately autonomy and then sustainability with the team. So like individual coaching them, teams have their own coaching objectives. Right. So measuring the progress towards those specific objectives of the teams or what the team's expecting then would be a good way to evaluate the ROI. So, for example, if the team works better together at the end of the team coaching engagement, or becomes higher performing through the metrics that have been established through the coaching agreement in the organization, or by the organization rather, you can infer the team and coaching engagement was successful. Right. So the value of the team to the organization then has increased, or the value of the team to the team or members of the members has increased. So there's really no major change in how you measure ROI from our standpoint from teams when compared to individuals, as the team is the client or the entity that's being coached, because you're coaching the team as a whole.
Perfect, Gage. Thanks. Cams, there is a question for you from the audience from Vijay Krishnamurthy is asking, saying, if ROI or effectiveness is not defined, how is the learning and development budget allocated?
Yeah, I think the learning and development budget, at least, again, I will talk from our perspective, is not allocated based on, whether we are going to use coaching or it is coaching. It is more oriented around skill development, behavioral development, leadership development, right? That's how you actually allocate the budget. So at that level, then what you do within each of it, for example, in our case, I said earlier that, we use coaching primarily in leadership development. In that case, then, it's up to the prerogative of the people who are defining the program on what they actually put into the program. So when we are measuring ROI, it's for the leadership development program, not for coaching as an ROI. So the level of sophistication that is required to measure ROI for coaching and then connecting that to investment is not something that I would say that we are there in that part of it yet. But having said that, the fact that, 12 years, and, I think Gage said earlier that coaching and coaching interventions have increased, number of coaches have increased clearly. Even in our case, our investment towards coaching has only gone up over the years because we have seen the benefit of it, whether we can actually point to a certain number or not. So that's what I would say.
Thanks, Cams. So I want to come back to this, right, which Gage was also talking about. And he talked about measuring, right? He talked about the effectiveness of the team, right? And that you would go about measuring that. So it seems to be more like a return on expectations, and the goal being a certain expectation on ROE, rather than an explicit ROI, which is an investment, which is a dollar value. So I want to get some thoughts from you first, Cams, and then Gage, I wanted to bring you up also on stage.
Yeah, I think that is definitely something that, I have seen being more effective in terms of how you can measure the return on expectations, especially in a team setting. We did our first team level coaching, I think probably 6 years or 7 years ago. And what we on return on expectation is because then you actually call out what is the expectation that you're expecting this team to do. Are you expecting a better team level connection? Like, I think Gage mentioned some of those. What are the objectives of the coaching engagement? How long the objectives are going to be? How are the individuals who are participating in the objectives? What is their assessment pre the assignment, and then post the assignment? What happens? Then you measure it after a year of what happened with that team. I mean, we've done all of that, and I think that is easier because then you know exactly that for the team. And it's a very much a company-driven agenda, which is to say that, this team, we expect them to do this. And so here are my 5 objectives for this. And then I think the contracting is far more clearer. So that is far more easier to measure. That's what our experience has been. We haven't used it very much, but wherever we've used it, it's easier to measure the return on expectations. Because you can easily do the pre-post, you can easily do the, shift in mindset, you can easily figure out, how is this team being more effective or not in the work that they're doing together, all of that. So I think it's definitely a better measure.
Perfect, thanks, Cam. Gage?
Yeah, I would agree. I think from our standpoint, ROI is inherently flawed in a way when measuring the effectiveness of coaching. There are lots of intangible and indirect benefits that can be difficult to financially quantify, but even though they're financially difficult to quantify, they're not immeasurable, right? And these intangible and indirect benefits can be pretty fruitful for the team, the individuals, and the organization. So if the coaching has helped resolve the situation desired, that is the coaching outcome or outcomes, then I think the coaching engagement can be deemed successful in managing the return on expectations. Then I like it better than ROI personally.
Lovely, thank you. So, Cams, this is a question for you then. People like yourself must be getting inquiries coming in from coach bots with a lot of data and metrics saying so many people engaged, so many people worked with it, so many queries were handled, and there is all metrics, right? Including saying, if you put one bot, it should be able to manage 10,000 employees versus one coach who's going to charge you a couple of $1,000, right? So how do you then decide ROE or ROI?
It's not just in coaching. I think bots are coming everywhere and we should be prepared for it. We just saw Elon Musk, launch his Tesla bot, and God knows what it's going to do. But I think, and I'll broaden the scope to not just coaching. I will include mentoring and counseling in sort of, it's a little bit of a broader bucket. especially because all three seem to get intermingled in when you think about this internally when you're going about it. So let me step back and explain what I'm trying to say. When you think about coaching, we use it as a very definite intervention in a leadership program, right? That is when you engage an external coach, they come in, there are objectives, you figure it out, you work together, you move the engagement forward. Whereas when you are thinking about this internally, because we have a lot of internal coaches, and we have internal counselors, and we have internal mentors. Sometimes the same person is playing all the three roles. So what my observation is, typically the questions that are asked by people are the same. So, what's to say that you actually can't do a bot, to respond to it? So that's just at the generic level, right? You have, over time, and now we know that over time, through AI or ML, the bots can learn, they can say, okay, Cams, you came to me last time, you asked these 5 questions, how are you doing on those questions? You can ask me now more questions, did you think about that? Did you think about, it's like Netflix giving you, suggestions based on your previous search. So I definitely believe that there is a role for that. Whether people will be comfortable doing it or not is a question. But I feel like it could happen. It's like speaking to an inanimate phone on the other side. A bot is just a more mechanized word. So I definitely think it's coming. At what level, I don't know. But, I feel like we need to be prepared for that.
Thank you, Cams. I'm going to run one more poll because we are at the stage where we have said that definitely there is ROE, may not be ROI right now, but definitely ROE is something which is being expected. What I want to ask the audience is this, right? Which is this question right there, right? Which is, I know how to showcase, impact, and demonstrate value of my coaching services to senior client sponsors, right? Okay. Rahul from Airmeet, could you just bring that up on the main screen, please? Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. I have some ideas, and okay, we've got some 12 boards out there. So the question is really this, right? I know how to showcase, impact, and demonstrate value of my coaching services to senior client sponsors. Yeah? And once again, please don't put your responses into the chat. Do go to the polls tab and add it to the poll there. Okay. Looks like a majority trending towards not, I have some ideas, and I'm guessing that and is I'd love to learn more, right? So, Gage, while the poll is going on there, right, are there specific models that you have seen both from your research days at the university and also in ICF, which you think can be useful for us in determining ROE or ROI?
I think that any model that has been validated and is well known could have its place, but it's really dependent on the coaching outcome, right? So I'd infer, again, these models which help you evaluate the success towards the coaching goal can be beneficial. For example, Kirkpatrick's model for measuring ROI can make sense, as ROI has typically been seen as an extension of that model, and ROI being the 5th phase. One model that could be beneficial as an example of being aligned with the goal. Let's say the goal is well-being and engagement, or well-being or engagement. Grant and Spence from 2010 has a well-being and engagement framework. So in this specific case, if the coaching outcome is to improve well-being and engagement, the model could provide some additional context to do such and help you evaluate.
Okay, all right. Cams, have you used any such model at all inside Publicis Sapient? What has been the results? How effective has it been for you?
We actually haven't used a model, but I think what we have done more, I think probably only once so far, is more of a we've not actually, when we engage with coaches, we don't actually start with, what can you deliver? I think we've gone past that very long back. We believe that it can deliver, and therefore we are continuing with it. So I don't think it's like, it's like, what is the role of, I think, Gage just talked about, engagement. How can you say whether something actually helps with the engagement or doesn't help with the engagement? It's very hard to define what that is and how you can actually measure whether this particular intervention led to that. I think causality is difficult to establish. So we haven't actually done any of this. When we go into a coaching engagement, we engage with the coach. What has worked for us is actually engaging with the coach, whether they are individuals who have worked with individuals, as in senior leaders in the company, who understand our context, who understand our business, and have been working with us for some time. So for us, that is probably more important when we start to engage, because the trust and belief in that individual and what they bring to the table is already established. So to answer your question, we have not asked. I actually also don't know any of the coaches that we engage with actually saying that here's a model through which you can measure the effectiveness or impact. I can give you one example of one senior leader where we have an individual coach who's now actually coaching the individual. We started with 6 months, then we evaluated, because I'm directly involved in the conversation. We evaluated, where is this individual reached? Here were the objectives. How far have they reached? And then, we decided together that it might be more beneficial to do another 6 months. So there is no initial model, I don't think, but it is more of a collaborative process by which we determine whether, it is working or not. But, it'd be great to hear if there is really a model through which we can actually measure the services.
Yeah. So, Cams, you talked about starting a coaching engagement and after 6 months measuring and then extending as is there. So, how do you then take care of the trailing effect of coaching? It's not that you coach somebody and the results show up, right? How do you factor that in and you say this is effective or this is not effective? And most of us coaches, for example, right, we finish a coaching engagement, we really don't see what happens afterwards with the individual.
Yeah, so we for that one, we are able to do it better if it's a cohort level coaching, right? In a leadership program, there are 20 people, we can figure out what happened to them through their engagement. 5 years ago, there was a leadership program. What happened to the participants? Where are they? Have they got promoted themselves? Are they playing larger roles in the organization? So that, I would say, are the trailing effects, because like you rightly said, it doesn't happen in the first year. Maybe it doesn't even happen actually in the second year. Our observation is that it takes a couple of years for the people who stay to see the impact on themselves. You can see it very fast, right? Their supervisor tells you that things have changed and you can actually see it. But to see the other impacts, whether it is in terms of role growth or whether in terms of a promotion or whether it's in terms of the impact at the office level. So, have they become from individual leaders to organizational leaders? Are they also becoming community leaders? Because in some cases we are actually seeing impact on society because of that. So again, we can't attribute it and say that it was only due to coaching or it was only due to the leadership program. But that if when we measure, we can see that they have started to make it 3, 4, 5 years later. So you have to keep the track. I mean, that's like a very difficult thing. But since we do leadership coaching by cohorts, I think it's easier when you're doing it in a cohort-based situation. And we've done it for 2 programs, both India program and the North America program, and it is working in both.
Thanks, Cam. Some audience questions here, and this is a variation of it coming from both Anuradha Sant as well as Sanjeev Bhatia here. So it is, if you currently do not measure ROI, ROE of coaching separately, how do you measure the ROI or ROE of leadership development as a whole? That's Anuradha's question. A variation is, how are you measuring ROI of leadership development? Right. So some curiosity there in terms of how do you measure that, Cams? Cams, you're on mute. Sorry.
Every time in one meeting, it has to happen one time that, you have to say your own name. So we have measured 5 or 6 parameters, I'd say. One is the individual growth, which I talked about earlier. There's a pre-assessment, post-assessment, what has changed. Then again, based on individual growth is what is the individual saying about themselves? What is their own feedback about the coach or the coaching engagement? How are they feeling about it? It's again at an individual level. The third one is not the coaching engagement, the leadership program, essentially. The third one, again, at the leadership level, at an individual level is, but that comes after 2 years. Have they got promoted? Are they playing broader roles? Has the revenue impact improved? Has their, team size changed? Things like that. So all of that is at the individual level, right? So that is those are the metrics that we have started to measure. We'll have to see what the trend is on those metrics, but those are what we've started to measure. From a team perspective, it is, has the retention improved? Has the engagement improved? We do something called a happiness survey every 6 months. So is that any different? I mean, is there a correlation between the people who went through the program and their happiness index or not? I mean, I think it's very convoluted things that we have to measure, but that's at the team level, that's how you can measure that. And that's something that we've measured. And then, the last one is more qualitative, which I already talked about earlier at an organizational level, is are they playing broader roles? Have they, progressed to doing org level or global initiatives? So things like that. That's a little more qualitative. So I don't think there is a straightforward answer to this, Ram. It's not like, having a dashboard and saying, this is how I'm measuring my leadership development effectiveness. But it's a lot of these factors that you put together before you. I think we do it every 2 years and evaluate, saying, hey, should we continue with this same leadership program or not? What is it delivering to us in terms of value? So that's what we do, I'd say. But, it's obviously we can bring more rigor into it. But like I said, we have great belief in both our program and in coaching. And so we haven't found the need to justify the investment.
Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to change a little bit of tact here, go somewhere else. There are internal and external coaches. Engage, I know ICF tracks around internal coaches, coaching within organization, and external coaches. Is there a different bar there when you look at return on expectations for internal coaches versus external coaches like some of us here?
Yeah, I think so. Internal coaches and getting internal coaching convoluted and mixed up is something that we've seen. So when comparing the internal and external coaches, it still goes back to the coaching objectives. But the internal coach should have some understanding of the organization already, and the culture and the climate and how things operate, who they're coaching, etc. So each internal coach and then each external coach will face their own challenges, but they each then have their own advantages as well. So whether or not, it's hard to say from a research perspective. I'd still tie any return on investment or expectations, rather, which I prefer, again, to the coaching objective. So I don't think either the internal or external coach has it easier than the other. I think it really depends on the context and the culture and climate of the organization. An external coach could perform better in scenario A, while an internal coach could perform better in scenario B.
Thanks, Gage. Cams, you use both internal and external coaches. What is your view? Are external coaches held to a higher standard? I had to ask that.
Yes, I will say yes. I will say yes, because that's their only job, so to speak, right? Like they are the experts. It's like, it's like in an organization, yes, I can talk about compensation, but, I'll ask my comp and ben lead to give me expertise, when I am looking at, changing something or fixing something or finding a specific solution. So yeah, I would definitely say external coaches will or should be definitely held to a higher standard. So credentials will be important, feedback will be important. what is the what has been their experience, the past experience, references, those kind of things become important from an external coach standpoint. And I would definitely think that we would look for a higher level of expertise from external coaching.
There's one question that came up from Sandhya, which is, how do you evaluate a coach, the external coach, before you hire them? Some quick tips for us to go prepare our resume here, Camps. Does ROE anywhere feature there at all?
No. So we definitely look at references. I mean, that's how we've done it. So I'll give you an example. A few years ago, we did a big sort of talent conclave, right? And as part of the talent conclave, we engaged with 70 or 80 coaches. That time, some of them, I think most of them actually came pro bono to us. And, they spent a whole day with us. They probably coached 8 or 10 people through the day. Because it was a conclave for the whole organization, and we were offering coaching to anybody who wanted it. We'd done some scheduling and things like that. So the way we identified and selected the coaches were based on their credentials, their certification or whatever, their references, that is, who are the companies that they have engaged with, what are the kind of leadership levels that they have coached for. So that was sort of the initial shortlist. Then our team actually talked to everybody and said, oh, you know what, this person will not fit because they come from a different industry or whatever. So there was a little bit of qualitative feedback that we got from our team. So once we'd identified that, let's say we got these 70 pro bono coaches. And then at the end of every coaching assignment on that day, we took feedback from our people. So we actually had then a view of what people found useful or what they did not find useful, what was the effectiveness of that coaching conversation. It was only 1 hour, but I think that gave us an insight into that. But I'm not saying that we can do it all the time, right? I mean, that's not something that we can do, but we do have a group of coaches who do that, who we know from an industry standpoint. But otherwise, it's mostly people we've worked with before. I haven't seen any new coaches that we've engaged with, other than people who, we go back to the same people, because it comes back to, how is the feedback from the previous coaching assignment, and then basis that we go for the next coach.
So Camps, what would be your advice to coaches, right? If they were to come and approach you, you just said that, look, we go back to the same pool. How do they come and convince you? And in part of that convincing, is ROE even a story at all? ROE or ROI?
See, for a coach to come, I'll tell you my need, and this might not be true of larger organizations. We are not very large as an organization. We have about 20,000 people globally. So we approach a coaching organization and say, hey, you know what, we are very specific, which I'm doing right now, actually, for my North America team. I'm like, okay, who do I approach? Because, it's a different kind of coaching engagement. I don't have anybody who has done this before. So I will ask all my existing coaches for references, or ask them, will you do this yourself? The second thing that I'm going to do is actually approach coaching organizations, possibly like ICF or, any others. I think there are 2 or 3 others that we know of that we have worked with in the past. So again, accreditation or certification with coaching organizations might be an important thing. What I have not, if someone approaches me on LinkedIn, I don't respond. So, I just want to say that that's a fact, because it's, I don't think coaching, at least what is a new concept, which is what we do with our clients, which is to say that, my fees are based on your outcomes.
Okay.
Right? So you bet your fees on the outcomes that you actually create for the client. Now that will be an entirely new way of doing it. I think we are doing it for our clients, in terms of different types of partnership that we have with clients. Sometimes we say, you know what, if if your customer base goes up by this much, then you can give us part of our fees like that, right? So it's like that. I think that'll be a very interesting idea.
Wow, Cams, you went towards performance-based, pricing out there, just out there.
Correct.
Before I come to you, first I want to go to Gage and ask him, saying performance-based pricing, right, is the flip side of return on investment. So what is the ICF's view on it? Is there something emerging that we can share here, Gage?
Honestly, I don't think we have a view, to my knowledge, of performance-based pricing. Each coach or organization takes their own approach to how they want to price their services. My advice is just to make sure that you stay competitive, and we don't have. I don't think we have an official viewpoint at ICF.
Perfect. Thanks, Gage. That was very diplomatic, very politically correct. Thank you so much. Cams, performance-based pricing. Are you talking actively to coaches, coaching organizations, and saying, hey, but you do see it coming, is it? Okay.
I mean, I would like to see that as a new way of doing it, because it is the spaces become competitive. There are many more coaches. If I want to see the difference between one coach and another, I would like to see the level of confidence maybe in the coach, right? Because like I said earlier, right, in the example I gave you, is we understand that sometimes the outcomes cannot be done in the time period that we think it can be done. It needs 6 months more. So if the coach and the organization could bet on that fact, not bet, say that, okay, look, we can make the difference to this person, and it's really important. So, if it was a CEO succession plan, for example, right, someone on that CEO slate, and we were able to say that, this is what we can get the person to in 1 year, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, whatever, because it's a long-term thing. I think there would be power in that. We haven't explored it. I haven't asked anyone, because you asked the question. Now I told you the answer, but I feel like it might be interesting to think about it. Or it could be something saying there is a base cost to this, and my bonus is based on, how the outcomes are achieved. Again, it's performance-based pricing in a different way, which is bonus and incentivized by bonus. It's a different idea.
Lovely, thanks. So you mentioned senior leadership out there, right? And we are also seeing coaching, which was traditionally only with senior leadership, increasingly coming down to other parts of the organization, what is possibly called as the democratization of coaching. So I'm assuming more budgets are going into coaching beyond the traditional training budgets, right? Has this affected the ROE conversation at all? And if so, how?
Yes, the budget has gone. It's the overall. Like I said earlier, right? The overall, there is an overall learning and development budget, and anything that goes into that, for you have to then decide where it goes. For us as an organization, 5 years ago, I think we moved to a non-performance rating based assessment, or a performance assessment, which means it's a development growth based assessment. So in that scenario, you need every manager to be able to coach the person, individual, on their development and growth goals, far more than just assessing performance. So in that scenario, you do have to invest a lot of your training dollars or development dollars in actually raising the bar of that manager group. So to answer your question, yes, when you think about, for me, is the return going to come out of, coaching 5 senior leaders or, 2,000 senior supervisors, then, I will actually need to make the call saying, okay, instead of the 5, maybe I will do 3, and I will put the rest of the budget into this one, because this will give me a better return. And that's the way where my organization would like to take this group of people, which is what we did 3 years ago, I think, which is, where we spent a lot of time, money, effort, everything on actually trying to coach the manager level, because we wanted to change the way, change the whole orientation around and become more growth mindset oriented. So.
Thank you, Cams.
Yeah.
I'm going to pick up a couple of questions from the audience. Girish Trivedi says, might be controversial, should coaching move to the business leaders then? or should coaching remain with HR teams? Right? And I guess this comes from the fact saying that if you're going to look at performance, probably the business teams are better oriented towards assessing performance improvements.
If that question was for me,
yes, Kams.
We haven't seen we haven't seen the level of deep expertise-led coaching at the business level or for business leaders. So if you want to make like some significant shifts in performance behavior, at a leadership level or at individual level, we haven't seen that happen on the business side. We've had to have.
Sorry, Kams, it's about the ownership of coaching. Should it remain with HR or should it move to business is the question.
Oh, okay. You mean the decision about coaching, or is it the actual process of coaching? What was the question I'm trying to figure out?
Girish is just asking, should coaching move to business or remain with HR teams? I guess, who makes the decision, who hires the coach, all of that, I guess.
I mean, I think at least in the foreseeable future, it should remain with the HR teams because, you're making decisions more centrally as at an organization for the organization, and you'd like to sort of have a level of consistency across. If it moves to the business, I have seen that they do take out the money from their own business to do coaching, but then it becomes very for that team or for that group of people. And then, then there are others who don't get it. So, that leads to a level of inconsistency in the way the coaching experience happens. So I think it'll be a combination actually. There will be a central one, which is, you're trying to make sure everybody is consistently getting some level of coaching. But if someone wants to go more deeper, so for example, if we want to do a women's sponsorship program or a women's coaching program, then that would come separately that can be owned by a business leader, which is what's happening even at our companies, that, some teams, some groups of people, some cohorts of people, business owns the coaching engagement and the budget for the engagement, but not the coaching itself, not the process of coaching.
Okay. Thanks, Kams. Couple of other questions which are coming from the audience. We are at the 10-minute mark here to close our session, Kams and Gage. So I'm going to pick up some of the questions which are coming from the audience here. I'm trying to go chronologically. There's one from Manisha Sharma here. Manisha asks, what is the best way to start the conversation and break through the process to start getting listened to? Who is the right person to approach? And I'm guessing Manisha is asking from a point of view of sales about coaching itself. So Kams, I guess you are the client representative here in this panel. So this is to you, Kams.
Yeah, I think it's good to identify the right person who's making the decisions in the organization. So it can't be, like I said, it can't be a blind LinkedIn request. Usually it would be the learning and development lead for the organizations or the HR lead for the organization. It depends on who's doing that. But getting to know a little bit more about the company would be a good way to, start the conversation. Even in our organization, which is actually relatively small, I keep saying small because, I'm thinking of Accenture and Infosys and Wipro and like all the IT companies which are so large. The decision is made either by the L&D lead or by the HR lead, typically. So those are probably the right people to approach. Sometimes it happens that a business leader will come to us and say, you know what, I met this person, and I think that the person, is great, because it's usually a business leader who has turned coach, that type of person. There are some CEOs, ex-CEOs, and some good ex-BU leads who have become coaches. In that case, there is a business network, and, that comes through that. It can come through that network as well. As you can see, I'm a very big proponent of reference-based coaches. So I can't speak beyond that.
And there is somebody who's asking the question. Rahul Gupta is batting for millennials and Gen Z here. They're saying if you keep going back to the old coaching pool, how would you get newer and younger coaches like me in the mix, Kams?
I don't know. You tell me. I think we have to be willing to experiment, which is what I tell everyone, that, we have to be willing to experiment. But, I'll tell you, not in coaching, but in other places where we've experimented, in areas that need expertise, it hasn't worked very well. So whether it is an analytics firm or whether it's a firm for, some manager assessments that we wanted to do, we said, okay, you know what, there are all these like new fancy new companies, young people who just got funding, let's try and work with them. And there is no depth. So and then you want to give people a chance, but that's my experience, so maybe I am tainted by that experience. But yeah.
I don't know if it's tainted, right? But definitely it seems to be there is a maturity model out there in terms of how you are approaching coaching. How can coaches understand the maturity of an organization when it comes to coaching? How do they assess that? How do they then therefore pitch themselves there?
See, I think most organizations start with episodic coaching, which is at the senior level, right? They probably want to see if it's working. It's easier to measure across 1, 2, 3, 5 individuals and see, if it actually worked. Did it give us the results? So I think episodic coaching is sort of the first step. So maybe, we need to pitch ourselves. That ends up being senior leaders, because it's that you want to make shifts in behaviors. The next step of that is actually cohort-based coaching. It could be group, or it could be in, small groups of people, large groups of people, teams of people, teams that are seeking to change behaviors, things like that. So that's the next level of coaching. Very, very effective, we have found, we did it even for the HR team a few years ago, and was very, very effective. We continue to do that with our HR teams on an ongoing basis. It's not like, a 6 month of event-based coaching, but it's like, we do coaching for once in 3 months, then after 3 months, then after 3 months, then after 3 months, like, so it's all passed through the whole year. So the next I would say is cohort-based coaching. And then I would say last, which no one has got into, Ram, and I think that's probably an area that people can think about, is what I said earlier. If I want to make 2,000 people in my company coaches, how does that happen? Right? There is no way that I can actually train all those, like, I've tried, it hasn't worked very successfully. We get 40% success through any kind of training program on this particular one. But how do you, transform the organization through their manager level people?
So Camps, would you see a preference for managers who are already certified coaches when you hire them itself? And would that be something that you would see in the future, which is managers certified coaches?
No, I can't see, Ram. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, Ram,
Yeah,
sorry, I lost you for 30 seconds. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the question was this, right? You want to bring in more, would you consider hiring more managers who are also certified coaches, given that that's where you want to go? Would that be something that we would see in the future?
It is utopia, yes, sure. But, it's hard enough to hire a manager these days. So I can't add another criteria of coaching to that.
Alrighty, okay.
Plus, we are growing people within, right? I mean, as most of our managers come from within the organization, they grow. So we have to teach them.
Okay, all right. Yes, Dr. Aravindan, back on cue. We are in the last 4 minutes out there. Dr. Aravindan, any observations from you? Anything that you want to do before bringing the session to a close?
No, really, I think it was a fantastic coverage of many points where it's almost like sort of bringing almost maximum output from Camps actually, and Gage in this conversation. Ram, you did a splendid job. Camps, only one thing, I'm just carrying on with what you told, maybe to cover up for 1 or 2 minutes and wind it up. Actually, if you see the CEOs or CXOs, they talk about coaching for particularly the supervisors and above. Okay, always they talk. Okay. Actually, what happens is some of the people who are in long term in the organizations, correct? We cannot tell them in the upfront in the face that your behavior is not good, correct? We have to tell them polished way, okay? So sometimes this coaching word is used for behavior change, But some companies like Dr. Reddy's, where I worked, okay, they took coaching for a new horizon way. So they actually take the best people in the company, they give coaching to actually bring the maximum potential. So how do you see these two important things? Because the coaching word is sometimes misread by the people who are put into coaching, and they try to be afraid of going to coaching as a sort of a improvement phase, correct? So how do you see
Yeah,
this?
no, I don't think we use it as improvement. Actually, we do two things. We use it for, improving when I say improving the performance, it's actually to bring significant shift in performance. So whether
Yeah.
it's leaders or, senior leadership or, leaders. When I talked about I think it's to improve the overall capability that we talk about of the whole organization, which is the whole manager layer, is when then it's not about improving, it's actually improving the capability of coaching at that level is when we look at it. We don't use coaching as an intervention for improving performance. No.
Yeah, because you indicated some behavior changes we need to bring there. I just thought of checking with
No,
you.
no, it's not. It's shift for, being in a succession role, or it's a shift for being in a bigger organizational role or things like that, So that's more the orientation.
Correct. Gage, from my side, I have seen, maybe you may have a research that once the organization tastes the benefit of coaching, I think they continue to bring it in a big way. Have you seen those kind of research, Gage?
Yeah, I've seen that a lot of organizations who get a positive experience from having coaching, bringing coaching in as an intervention or an engagement, then continue to reuse coaching and then expand the amount of coaching that they employ within the organization, right? So if I bring on 3 coaches to coach on 3 managers, and it's a good ROE, ROI, where the 3 managers then improve and then the business functions improve, then that organization is going to be more likely to bring on more coaches for more managers. So it's really based on their experience, but most research then would suggest that the experience is often good. Then the organizations then continue to expand into more coaching.
So Ram, I like the way you put that the old coaches are preferred than the new coaches. So how do you see your life going now? When we talk this topic, when you chairing this topic as a moderator, how your life is going now?
As I said, right, old coaches are, good coaches. Old is gold. Probably when it gets to it, I'll put some old wine into a new bottle and go back to camps. And she does change her mind, right? So that's what I'll do, Dr. Ravind.
Okay, wonderful. We are on dot. Is there any other questions you want to look into, Ram, or we are good to go?
I think we're good to go. There's a lot of questions out there, but I don't think we'll be able to do it justice in the time that we have, Dr. Aravindan. So I had to pick and choose. Sorry, everybody.
No, we have this. We will try to take these questions and go back to them. Thank you very much, Kams. Wonderful for you to join in your holiday trip, but I really appreciate that. Gage, thank you very much for joining with us in the morning there in US. Ram, beautiful moderation, so sweet, and flow you had in the moderation. I think all the questions were more coming from the practical reality, and I think the Cam's answer was more real and true in the scenario of what we are operating. So thank you very much, all the 3, for making this session more successful and more useful for the audience and delegates here. And we once again from ICF Chennai chapter and all the chapters of ICF and Global, we thank you for participating and creating a value for all of us. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.